Gaming has changed, and we have changed along with it. Today, I would like to acknowledge these changes by addressing the top 10 most toxic fan bases in video games. I hope you enjoy. Considered by many to be the cringiest IP in gaming, Fortnite is an absolute blemish on the gaming industry. It's a plague. Not only is it the only thing keeping Epic relevant, it's also the only thing that a lot of people play. The only people who care about Fortnite are those who are too cheap and lazy to get something made by a real developer that's far superior, way better balanced, has better visuals, better mechanics, more things to do. This is free-to-play slop that is tailor-made for people who don't know the first thing about video games. And unfortunately, the target audience for this, 4 to 5-year-old kids, don't really understand that there are better games out there. And so telling them that gets them really upset, and they throw a tantrum, and they make fun of you like, oh, you just don't get it. This is the coolest thing ever. I've seen concerts in game, bro. Like, the simple fact of the matter is that Fortnite has only remained relevant due to its licensing of other IPs for use in its setting. Without that, without the constant updates and the worship it gets from the general public, Fortnite has absolutely nothing. If Fortnite is the game that casual children play, Call of Duty is the equivalent for adults. For people who have never been to war and have never contributed anything meaningful to society at all, Call of Duty is their escape. It's their way of feeling like a hero. This is something they can do to live out their fantasies of going to some foreign country and murdering the people there because they're too fat and lazy to do it in their real lives. Like, it is downright appalling to see how popular these games are, how much they sell, and year after year, how many people continue to pretend that these games are genuinely good. Right now, Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is considered to be one of the best CODs in years. And the mere fact that we're talking about this really shows just how delusional the Call of Duty fan base actually is. Nothing this IP has ever produced has ever been of value. Imagine playing a game when you were a small, little bitty child and spending your entire adult life obsessing over it, longing over a sequel, like condemning every Mario spin-off that comes out because it's not as good as Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. For certain people online, that is their everyday reality. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door has cultivated this insane online audience that genuinely thinks this mediocre, generic, uninspired RPG from the mid-2000s is secretly one of the best games ever made, when in reality, it got mogged by the first Paper Mario. It got mogged by the third Paper Mario, by the fourth, by the fifth, and even other Mario RPG series, including Super Mario RPG and the Mario and Luigi games. The Thousand-Year Door has absolutely nothing going for it other than this sense of nostalgia. Like, oh man, things were so good back when I had a GameCube and was playing this game all the time. Like, the game simply doesn't live up to the reputation. And the vast majority of fans are unwilling to admit the strengths, the superiority of other Mario RPGs. Most recently seen with the immediate backlash to Mario and Luigi Brothership. There are people out there who will tell you that Mario and Luigi should be canceled so intelligent systems can have more resources to make more Paper Mario games like this. Here's some evidence for those of you who don't believe me. This is an actual, genuine response from a Paper Mario fan. Read it and weep. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door absolutely absolutely deserves a spot in history for resonating with so many people and introducing a lot of people to the RPG genre, but the obsession over it has never made any sense, and the audience really needs to move on to other RPGs, such as Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, or Mario and Luigi. Better games exist, but the fan base cannot bring itself to admit it. For about 3 days in 2015, Undertale was spammed everywhere online. YouTubers couldn't shut up about it. 4chan was spammed with posts, and so many people were making this out to be one of the best RPGs ever made. Not only is it one of the most awful things ever produced, it's also something that really demonstrated the lengths and depths of what YouTubers would promote in order to shill their own brands. Undertale was a complete mess from the get-go, but it's very, very uncommon to see people acknowledge that. The only reason this game is relevant at all is because of how certain individuals who were trying to push an agenda could not shut up about it for those 3 days. There is no doubt in my mind when it comes to video game IPs from the 90s, nothing has spawned more disgusting individuals than Sonic the Hedgehog. One only has to look into the history of Chris Chan and what he did to his mother to prove that for a fact. Chris Chan is not an anomaly. He is a stereotypical example as to what these people are actually like. 40-year-old balding man children who live with their mothers and have never even held a girl's hand. That is Chris Chan's existence. That is the average Sonic fan. Someone who desperately clings onto their childhood in hopes of feeling some semblance of happiness. When all they had to worry about was trying to convince the cooler kids on the school bus that Sonic was better than Mario. Trying desperately to gaslight people into thinking blast processing was a real thing, or that Sonic had really compelling storylines in the comics, or that the Sonic cartoon was good, or the idea, the myth that Sonic was ever a relevant video game character. The grim reality is that outside of his very brief window of relevancy in the early 90s, when people thought this was going to be the next Mario, Sonic has never been that popular. Sonic just kind of exists. Stupid kids pick him up because it's Sonic, and they drop him just as quickly because he just doesn't really have anything going for him other than his design and his core concept of gotta go fast, gotta go fast, gotta go faster, 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 faster. When you actually try to play the games, when you actually spend any amount of time with Sonic at all, what you'll quickly realize is that all of it pales in comparison to the far superior Nintendo titles. And as a result of that, anybody who has spent any amount of time with these games at all has no respect for them. It's shocking to me how so many people will try and tell you Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is one of the best platformers ever made, when in reality, it isn't even the best game in the Sonic the Hedgehog trilogy. It's actually the weakest. So when you really stop to think about this, when you think about how Sonic's legacy is built on a lie, the idea that this was an IP that people liked more than Mario, you really understand just how inherently toxic the Sonic the Hedgehog fan base actually is. This is one of the worst things that ever happened to video games, and it really should be acknowledged as such. Perhaps due to the fact that Sonic the Hedgehog is in the game, there can be no denying that out of all of the Nintendo franchises that exist, all of the franchises that have been made, all the games that have come out, the legions of fans that have become huge, huge fans of Nintendo over the years, there is no doubt in my mind that out of every Nintendo IP, the most toxic by far is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. even people outside of the community are aware of just how disgusting these people are, how they won't take showers, how they spurg out at people for playing certain characters, playing certain stages, playing certain games in the series, right? When you see how often people freak out over roster decisions or gameplay changes or announcements, and when you see just how upset they get at Nintendo Directs when they don't have any new Super Smash Bros. Information to share, right? We have seen this happen over the past decade, but it cannot be denied that the Smash Bros. Audience, because it correlates with basically every other toxic gaming franchise fan base out there, that it is unbelievably toxic. I've heard stories about evil, malicious things that players have done. I've seen them commit horrible acts. They've said terrible things. They've done terrible things. Like Ultimate Super Smash Bros. It's a great game, one of my all-time favorites, but there can be no denying that the nature of this kind of crossover thing is a breeding ground for this kind of behavior. And we, as Super Smash Bros. Fans, should speak out and condemn it harder than anyone. In this day and age, Sony is essentially a dead brand, to the point where there's really not really much of a point to talk about them here. Because, who cares about PlayStation in 2024? But with seeing recent events, right, seeing how many individuals are in denial about the fact that the PSP failed and that the PS2 did not sell as many units as Sony reported, it does need to be talked about. Because although the PlayStation 5 is clearly on the way out, and Sony really has no way to salvage their brand, a lot of people are nostalgic for the PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation 2 for superficial reasons. Namely, the myth that this was a console that demolished the Nintendo brand and proved that big boys have gone into the gaming industry. This was the mature console for mature gamers. This is the big thing in gaming. It was never true. It was all smoke and mirrors. PlayStation could never compete with Nintendo at all. But the narrative pushed forward by game journals and by these fanboys created this illusion that PlayStation was this hyper-successful, very extremely popular brand, when in reality, they established no IPs, none of their hardware remains relevant decades later, nobody really remembers anything about them, right? All anybody does is just worship every new PlayStation exclusive that comes out, only for it to be forgotten when the next PlayStation exclusive comes out. So, for example, a couple of years ago, we were supposed to believe that Horizon Zero Dawn was a viable competitor to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, today, that seems completely laughable, considering just how cutting-edge Breath of the Wild was and how simplistic Horizon was in comparison. But at the time, when those games first came out, that was the deeply held narrative. People were unwilling to admit that Horizon lost for a long time. And what did Sony do? They bundled it in with a bazillion different PS4s to inflate their sales numbers. They gave away the DLC to create the illusion that Horizon was some super popular IP, to the point where until the sequel came out and bombed, people genuinely thought that Horizon Mini Yawns sold 20 million units. People genuinely thought that this was a major PlayStation IP. And to see it collapse the way it did, the same way that The Last of Us did, the same way that every other PlayStation IP has, really goes to show you just how incapable PlayStation is at building up a brand. Those of you who are celebrating Astrobot's recent win, quote unquote, at the Game Awards, actually that award was bought and paid for, the win, quote unquote, at the Game Awards, you have to keep in mind that Ashtaba is going to be tossed aside just as quickly as everything else PlayStation has propped up over the years. You know, just like Metal Gear Solid, just like Final Fantasy VII, just like every other major PlayStation IP that was supposedly bigger and better than everything Nintendo has ever done. When you really take a look at what PlayStation is doing and what their fans are saying, all it is just a prestige brand. People think they're cool because they buy and play on PlayStation. It doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the content or the games, the developers, or anything like that. They are worshiping PlayStation because that's all they've ever done, and it's their brand. When you really take that into consideration, when you think about how pathetic that is, when you see just how quickly something like Helldivers 2 falls off and becomes irrelevant, when you look at like failures like Concord, what you see is a company that is not a shell of its former self, but is exposing itself for what it really was all along. PlayStation was never successful. It was never popular. It was never bigger and better than Nintendo. You know, during the PS1's heyday, that period of time where people were insisting that PS1 had the best RPGs on the market, Nintendo introduced Pokemon, and it became the biggest brand in the world. Interesting how people don't consider Pokemon a real RPG. But things like this are not uncommon. And it needs to be understood that PlayStation is absolutely the most toxic of the three major console brands. There can be no denying it. FromSoftware fans are the absolute second worst fan base in gaming. It's really not even close when it comes to like comparing it to everything else that's out there, everything else that's happened, everyone else we've spoken about at this point. FromSoftware fans are on a whole other level. They genuinely believe that FromSoftware is the greatest developer in gaming. And if you don't agree with that, you're just a casual, man. Like what? Could you not beat Dark Souls? I have, actually. And I don't enjoy it because it's a clunky, unintuitive mess, right? If Dark Souls actually had good controls and actually had mechanics that made sense, nobody would care about it. But because it's so obtuse, because the game doesn't spoon feed you everything, a bunch of delusional players have gaslit themselves into thinking that it's some super complex IP when it's really not. All you have to do is take advantage of the simplistic mechanics and learn how to play the game. And it does take a specific skill set to win at Dark Souls, right? But it's by no means like a particularly difficult IP or something that really stands out. You know, Monster Hunter is my go-to example as something that does the same general concept but better. But FromSoftware as a whole for the past 10 years have been put on a pedestal to the point where people consider it the best thing ever. And that is definitely something that we should condemn as toxic behavior.
What did you get? Oh, I bought like a 2021 mid-tier Mac, and not the Mac Pro. You know, that thing costs like...
That's right. If you don't spend your money on a gaming PC, you deserve to have your leg broken. Never mind the fact that phones are perfectly serviceable pieces of technology. Never mind the fact that plenty of fringe pieces of tech, like Kindles, like gaming consoles, like Alexa, you know, things like that can offer a variety of experiences at a much more affordable price than PCs in a much more accessible format. No, because PCs can do everything if you put all the time, effort, money, and time into it. Because PCs can do everything, that inherently makes them quote unquote better, even though there will always be a need for other pieces of tech other than gaming PCs. Gaming PCs are not some end all be all when it comes to your work life balance, okay? Like, your life does not revolve around a PC. It doesn't, right? You are never going to be in a position where you are only going to use a PC. But plenty of people make it out to sound that way, that PCs are so good at everything that all you have to do is just build one, man, and all your needs will be taken care of. Never mind the fact that in order to get a hold of games that aren't available on Steam, that you're going to have to start pirating. You know, they always get a little bit fuzzy on the details. Like, they always say things like, "Oh, like, I'm emulating my legally obtained copy," but in reality, they just downloaded it off the internet. And people are getting in trouble for this. Like, the reality is, PC gaming is far more expensive for about the same product. When you really break it down, you're playing all the same games on your $3,000 gaming PC that you could get on a $600 PS5, right? If the PlayStation brand was not so reprehensible and disgusting in its own right, nobody would even bother with a PC. But because PlayStation and Xbox are becoming so increasingly toxic to the consumers, more and more people are falling for this myth that gaming PCs are better because corporations can't screw you over as easily. But it simply isn't true. When you really look at getting your own PC, it's better to get something that's far more affordable, that can do what you need your PC to do while playing your real games on your Nintendo Switch. PC is never going to get Nintendo releases on that platform, but so many people are under this misconception that it is. And Nintendo games are by far the ones you should be playing, especially if you're younger. So when you look at just the cost, when you look at the value you're going to get out of it, when you look at like the lack of products that you can get through the gaming PC, like, why exactly would you ever think that this thing is going to replace consoles? It simply isn't going to happen. But the PC master race is in complete denial about this. They genuinely think it's a matter of time, even though PlayStation and Xbox are doing everything they can to put their brand on PC, meaning that you are going to be forced to subscribe to PlayStation's account system to play online for their games, right? They are pushing for that policy. And this is going to lead to more and more restrictions. This is going to lead to more and more issues when it comes to playing games like this. And more and more people are realizing that, you know, PC gaming isn't that special. There are no hidden gems. You know, there are no huge AAA games that far surpass anything that can be found in consoles. You know, in this day and age, everything that is on PC is easily available on all other platforms. Why exactly does PC excel? It doesn't. The reality, this idea that you have to spend all this time, money, and effort into building the highest quality possible gaming PC when you're much better off with something more mid-range that can like edit YouTube videos or whatever, right? You don't need a gaming PC. If you're really into video games, you are best off buying a Nintendo console. With that being said, however, what makes the PC master race so toxic is their inherent opinion that their games are just better than yours. Even though they don't play your games or know anything about them, they can tell you that Baldur's Gate 3 is better than other games on Nintendo platforms. Like, oh man, Nintendo fans wouldn't know how to handle a strategy RPG when we've been playing Fire Emblem for decades now. Like the cope you keep seeing people come up with in regards to their games, the constant insistence that World of Warcraft is still relevant and that Final Fantasy XIV by itself is going to keep Square Enix from going bankrupt, like it's all just a gigantic cope. The idea that Half-Life 3 is somehow going to come out and save PC gaming is just a straight up delusion at this point. What exactly are you playing on your gaming PCs? When you look at gaming PC YouTubers, all you see is a bunch of like 40-year-old fat, balding man children just sitting there screaming about 60 FPS and about how PC can emulate everything. It's all just a giant cope, right? The community is built around this idea that console players don't know enough about PC gaming to call them out on their nonsense. They don't know about the issues in regards to licensing products on PC. They don't know how every storefront other than Steam is failing. They don't understand that major PC subsidiaries like CD Projekt Red end up going to consoles and becoming hugely successful there, right? Because here's a shocker, the vast majority of the population don't game on gaming PCs. The idea that it's this quick, massively growing business model is just absurd. The metrics that people share about how PC is like making more money than other companies is just completely out of touch with reality. It just isn't true at all. And when it takes an entire decade to put out a game like Baldur's Gate 3, a game that gets mogged by dozens of other Nintendo games that came out in the same time frame, like what exactly is your high-end gaming PC going to be playing? The game is only like 100 hours long. It's not all that complex. It doesn't look that good, right? Like, you would be better off just buying a Nintendo Switch and playing better games.